is supposed to have. We know that he had been deprived of his religious studies, but we would really like to ask even at this hour for Chinese government to allow him to be free as a grown-up person. He is going to be 18 years old.
How easy is it for you, though, to get information about him, independent information about his whereabouts and why he was taken into Chinese custody?
It's very difficult to get information about his whereabouts. And as you know, that this is not just issue about one person. The whole issue about the panchen lama is the core issue of Tibetan people's fundamental religious belief. As you know, that the whole institution of reincarnation is very unique to Tibetan form of Buddhism, and therefore what we oppose is the atheist Communist Party nominating one of our most important religious leaders. This should be left entirely to the religious leaders, particularly in this case for His Holiness the Dalai Lama to choose. So this is not just a issue about 18-year boy, but this is about the core of Tibetan people's right to practice our form of religion.
You've been involved, haven't you, in negotiations with China on this issue. Do you see any sign of hope that Beijing may soften its stance on this?
Well, you're right. I've been visiting China since 2002. I have had 5 rounds of meetings with the Chinese government. The last one was being February of last year. We are still committed to find a solution. We believe that the best way for us to negotiate a solution, and you know very well that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is asking for solution within PRC. He has a very courageously decided not to seek independence. So it is our hope that the Chinese government will follow the right way to find a solution through negotiations. But then I'm worried, you see, because in the last few years, on one hand, they are engaged in meeting with us periodically. On the other hand, they had been systematically imposing all kinds of new rules and regulations, which seems to be definitely geared towards the very heart of Tibetan people's way of life, especially our religious tradition. From that point of view, we become very skeptical whether this whole exercise of inviting my delegation for periodic, like yearly ritual discussion is nothing but just to gain time, while they at the same time try systematically undermine Tibetan people's religious belief, our institutions.
But sorry to interrupt you, but can you see China's point of view? What they're actually saying to Tibet is by hanging on to these old traditions, you're restricting yourself from being part of that economic growth that China could offer you.
This is totally misleading. We are absolutely in favor of modernity. In fact, I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama has proven to be far more ahead of China. Look, it is in exile in India where he has created the most viable democratic institutions. It is the Dalai Lama who is today engaged in discussing with some of the world's best scientific minds about the future of mankind. So for the, in fact, unfortunately, it is the Chinese policy which I think is still very ancient and decadent. In fact, in this day and age, it is the atheist Chinese government who is trying to resurrect some of the old, because if you go to China today, you find all the so-called reactionaries today holding offices under Chinese government. You come to India, you find that every leader in exile is today directly elected by the Tibetan people. So the Chinese propaganda of trying to blame His Holiness as reactionary, as old-minded, will not wash, because I think the whole world knows that he is one of the most progressive. He has given all his powers. Today he is the moral leader. In fact, he also made it very clear when he goes back to China and Tibet under a new agreement, he will not hold any political office at all. So I think, okay, only maybe, unfortunately, some of the people inside China who has no access to international information could be misled. But even that is becoming more and more difficult now.
Okay, Lodigari, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there and for joining us here on Asia Today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the
Now, an attempt by the government in Bangladesh to exile